Welcome everyone to the game of Magnus Carlsen in Paris Freestyle Chess Grand Slam Tour, the second leg of this event. Magnus Carlsen has the white pieces. He is going to take on the newlywed Vidit Gujrathi. Magnus is studying the position because it's freestyle chess, the pieces are all scrambled up, and maybe it's not a common thing to make Magnus wait before the games. You know, he's generally the one who makes his opponents wait. And there he arrives, his first game after marriage. This is going to be a very interesting battle between these two players. Magnus looking at the pieces. Let's have a look at the pieces here. We have the handshake is here. The clocks have begun. We have a rook, bishop, king, knight, and the first move e4 queen, rook, bishop, knight. So with this move, you open up the queen, and let's see how Vidit responds. He plays d5, places the pawn in the center of the board. He plays his pawn to c3, opens up the bishop, wants to play d4. Pawn comes up to f6, looking here at the a2 pawn. And Magnus is looking at other games, maybe just looking at what's going on there. And he decides to push his pawn to f4. One of the key things that one has noticed in freestyle chess is how effectively you are able to activate your bishops. And right now you can see Magnus has activated his bishop. Knight comes out to g6, and I think pushing the pawn forward makes a lot of sense, just gaining space. So he pushes the pawn forward, attacks the knight. The knight has to go back to e7. Yes, knight to e7 has been played. And now pawn to g4 played. So Magnus is playing on the flank. He's trying to gain space with h4 and g5. But I believe that black will strike in the center with d5. Not for now. Vidit plays knight to c6. He brings his piece out. He wants to then play pawn to d5 next. The knight comes out to g3. There's a soft spot in the position for sure, that is g7. If the knight goes to h5, it can attack that g7 point. And Vidit taking time early in the opening is the right strategy. You can see already after just 6 moves he's down to 4 minutes 42 seconds. He plays this little move a6, and that's because he wants to trade off these bishop via a7. Magnus goes b4. That's a risky move for sure. Magnus is trying to play on the queen side. He's trying to play on the king side. And Vidit strikes in the center with d5. A good move right in the center of the board. And now Magnus goes knight to h5. He's looking at the g7 pawn. Maybe queen f7 makes some sense here. Yeah, he plays queen f7. He defends g7, and white hasn't developed the pieces yet. All are on their initial squares almost. a4, he's just continuing to play with his pawns. While this is great and the engine agrees with it, the problem definitely is with the king on c1. It could come under some deadly attack. Bishop a2 played. Queen goes back to f8. Nice move there by Vidit, trying to go out of the pin there. Now g5 makes a lot of sense, trying to create some play on the king side like g5 takes and then you have f6 moving in. But instead Magnus takes on d5. Maybe not the most accurate move. Vidit takes back. Bishop takes on d5 here, and he takes back with the knight. Knight takes on d5 happens. And now the queen moves up to e4. So white is slowly getting his pieces out, but maybe bishop a7 makes a lot of sense to trade here. He plays his queen to f7 again, defending the knight, but also eyeing this b3 square to infiltrate in the future. Let's see what Magnus plays here. Maybe knight b2 to develop his knight. He plays knight to e3. Of course, taking here is great. Bishop a7 also a great move. But Vidit seems to be getting some aggressive ideas. He sacks his knight. Knight takes b4. Wow, what a move. And you can see Magnus is a bit stunned there. He's just kind of laid back in his chair, not moving forward. He's assessing why has Vidit sacrificed his knight here? Because after pawn takes, he's going to come into the center of the board with rook d4, attacking the queen and the pawn. Insane. Queen b1, the best move found here by Magnus. His point is, if you take here, he wants to go queen a2, trade the queens. So Vidit plays knight b4, stopping the queen from coming to a2. And Magnus once again finds the best move, rook a3, controlling d3 square, also preparing queen b3. Magnus is so strong, you can't make these sacrifices against him which are unsound. But Vidit is unperturbed. He goes bishop a7. He's like, I'm controlling this long diagonal. My bishop is well placed. Queen b3, offering a trade of queens here. And the queen, you don't want to trade queens because then it's nothing. Queen f8. He goes back. But don't you have a check now? Queen e6 check maybe. Oh, he gives a check. He gives a check. King b8 would mean that the rook on a8 is then permanently not great placed. Rook d7 is a fantastic move. Now he can long castle. And Magnus plays bishop f2, which is a mistake. g5 was the best move. And you can see Vidit can now long castle. He does it. What a move. Rooks have been dibbled down the d-file. He short castles. He tries to run away with his king, but is that going to be enough now? Vidit can simply play king b8. He goes knight c6. He brings his knight back. He's threatening knight d4. He's also attacking the rook on a3. What phenomenal play by Vidit. He's outplaying Magnus, and that too in his first game after marriage. He hasn't really been working too much on his chess. Rook takes d4, but he's played with a lot of character here. Bishop takes d4, and it's the right move to take with the bishop so that later on the d2 pawn will remain a weakness. Rook comes to b1. Now you can't play king b8 because queen takes a6 would be hanging. There is a pin here. So maybe first c6, which is a good move here. The position is still very complicated. Knight g3, Magnus is coming in with his knight to e4. Maybe the other knight to c4. Vidit goes in with the queen, queen to a3. Tremendous. And now the queen comes back to c4. Let's see what Vidit plays. Maybe bishop a7, just attacking the d2 pawn would be so good. Yes, he finds it. Bishop a7 on the board. The d2 pawn is under pressure. He finds knight e4, defending here. At this point, it's unclear whether this queen trade is good or bad. Vidit plays it. It's actually a great move. It's the first choice of the engine. Takes on d3. Rook d3. The point is that because the d2 pawn is weak, it really should work. And already Vidit has 2 pawns for 2 minor pieces and a rook. So rook and 2 pawns against 2 minor pieces. Knight c4 played. He takes the bishop. Rook takes, and now b5 is a very powerful move, but Vidit just has 15 seconds. He goes rook d4. He's attacking the 2 knights. Well, first a check is important. He plays pawn to d3. Well, pawn to d3 because if you take on d3, it's possible, but then the knight goes to c5. So he takes it. Knight c5, a double attack on d3 and b7. But there is b5. He finds it. What a move by Vidit, giving up his rook. Magnus takes the rook. Rook takes d3. This change in the position is now that Vidit has 3 pawns for a rook for a for a knight. These 2 pawns are passes. He brings his king up. Magnus is trying to create his own passed pawn. He goes g5. Vidit takes it. Fg5. Rook comes to g1, creating play here. Maybe the f pawn, like for example, if you go h6, he will play h4, trying to win this. But Vidit doesn't stop there. He starts pushing his kingside pawns. Rook takes g5. Rook comes back, defends the pawn. The position is still equal. It can go in any direction. King e4 found by Magnus. He's bringing his king in. He pushes his pawn. Who's stronger here? That's the big question. Rook comes back to g2, and now just move everything together. King b6. King a5, b4. That's what he does. King comes to b6, and Magnus brings his knight in with a check. Vidit moves his king away to a5, and he takes the pawn on e5. Well, this could end up in any direction. I mean, white could also win this. Black could also try for a win because look at those pawns. They are moving down the board. b3. b4 played. Rook c2, and b3. He pushes forward. Check. King goes back to a6, and rook c4 played. Well, the king comes up to b5. He's attacking the rook on c4, and he moves in. Rook to c8, and maybe it's time to push the a pawn as well. Can we do it? a3. Well, he first brings his rook to b7 so that there are no checks from the back. Rook b7. Knight king comes back. King d4. Vidit pushes even b2. It's getting stressful. Is Magnus Carlsen in trouble? He finds an amazing move because if you make a queen, there is a knight fork with knight c3. You could make a knight actually potentially. It's possible, and the position would be even. But he goes king a5. Vidit wants to win now. Knight c3. If he makes a queen here, there is rook a4 winning. So Vidit goes rook to b4, the best move. Magnus comes back, knight b1. Now taking the rook would be also a draw. But Vidit goes rook b5. He keeps the rooks on the board, and Magnus comes here, king c3. Well, he takes the pawn on f5. Rook h4, attacking the pawn on h7. h6. King takes b2. Rook check, and now king comes up to c3. There's another check. The king moves up to c4. Well, Vidit needs to push his pawn, and he needs to get rid of the white pawn on h2. That's the key pawn. If that remains, there will be trouble. So king b6 played, and Magnus gives rook h5. He cuts the king off for Vidit. He keeps his king. I think just bringing the king over to the kingside pawns makes a lot of sense now. Sometimes it's not so clear how white should continue in such position because he has to manage his king, knight, rook, everyone. Meanwhile, for black it's pretty straightforward. Rook d3 keeping an eye here. King c4. Rook f3. The rook comes back to a5. He's attacking the pawn on a3. The rook moves in. He's attacking this now. Check. King goes back to b7. He takes the pawn. Vidit also takes the pawn, and I guess the players could agree to a draw here because knight-rook versus rook is a theoretical draw. But Vidit also has two extra pawns. But I believe that both players want to play on. You know, Vidit wants to play on till he has those pawns. Magnus wants to play on. Maybe he wins both the pawns. We are on move number 65. King comes to d5, and now g4 played. Knight goes to d6 check. King b8 played by Vidit, and Magnus gives another check. King a7 played. You just have to be careful around the corners here. Your king could get checkmated if you are not careful. So knight to b5 check again. And he goes back king c7. Another check. Now king goes back to c8. He gives a check. King to b7. Well, the players are just moving around here. Magnus also has to figure out when does he want to release the black king from the mating kind of ideas and start focusing on winning these pawns on the king's side. King c8. He goes rook a3. He goes king b7 back. Both players have roughly 30 seconds on the clock. Vidit down to 13 seconds actually. Knight c5. He's feeling the bit of pressure here, and I think Magnus knows it that Vidit often gets under pressure towards the end. King b8, and now if you see king c8, king c6 could be an idea. King c6 with the idea of knight d7 check. Look at this check, and it's a mate. So nice move, pinning the knight. Very important. He goes rook e3. Somewhere Vidit has to patiently play this, otherwise he might get checkmated. Magnus has somehow got his pieces well coordinated. Rook h7. He's going after this pawn. Do you want to go here and defend? Then there is knight a6 with a mate. So g3 played. He takes the pawn. g2. Now only one pawn remains on the board. Magnus goes again and gives a check. King comes up. He plays rook g8. He places the rook behind the passer, and Vidit plays rook to b2. Still a draw. Check, and now very important to play king a8. He finds it because if king b8, it was already knight a6 with a mate. So king a8. Knight a4 played, attacking the rook, threatening a check again. A check given here. King b6, and if he manages to get king a6, knight b6 and rook b7 mate. That would be something. Check. Rook goes here. He wins back. He wins the pawn. Now it's a pure rook knight versus rook. We are on move number 87. So Vidit has to play 50 more moves before he can claim a draw. So rook goes to g6 and quickly escapes with his king to c8. It's a good idea. The knight comes in. I guess it's even better to just escape again. Yes, king d8. Vidit's king is escaping from the corner. Once the king is out of the corner, it's very difficult to checkmate it. Think maybe you can further go out king e7, and now the black king is safe and there. Now the black king is safe and there shouldn't be any issues. Check king f7, and usually it's very difficult to win such positions with white black. Has quite an easy time defending. He goes rook a8 on the other side, intending to start giving checks here. Magnus plays knight to db7. Well, in some ways he has things a bit covered here. You can see goes rook a7, rook b6. The king, black king, cannot come up beyond the third rank, sixth rank, so with it maybe he's a bit in a dicey situation. Should he go king g7? He goes king f8, king e6, and I guess going down and starting to check from below makes a lot of sense. King g7, he's trying to run away. Maybe king g6, king g5, he wants to run away in this way. Rook b1 played here by Magnus. If king g6, he may want to just give a check. Push him onto the h file, goes rook a2 check, and now king comes to f8 and rook check again. King g7 makes a lot of sense, brings the knight, but it's time to check now with your own rook. Yeah, with it doing it well. We have now reached move number 100 at this point. King f5, and with it a bit confused, he's Around 20-second mark, so there are 10 seconds which you get every move, but he's coming down to this last few seconds every time rook g2 knight comes to e4, and maybe it's time to escape with the king this way perhaps. Yeah, he does it, king f7, and Magnus goes on the other side. Oh, he wants to give a check and push him away, so rook e2 played, but now it's time for a check and the king is pushed back to the last rank, king e8, and you can't go king e6 because of rook e4 check, so he goes king e5 and mag and v with keeps the pin. Magnus goes king d5, maybe king f8, not a bad idea, many options actually, just to wait also could be fine. He goes king f8. The knight jumps into d6, well, can we try and trade off here, rook e7, it's also actually it's maybe a problem because of check, king g7, knight f5, oof, don't want to do that. He goes king g8 and knight comes back to c4, king to f8, knight to e5 played. Magnus's stamina is insane. He goes king g8 again, king e6 closing. Rook e2 keeping the pin on the knight, the rook comes from the other side. Now Vidit plays his king up to g7, still okay, it's equal check. Now king h6 makes a lot of sense, he plays it, rook to g3, important moment in the game. Vidit goes king h5, he must be getting tired. Now king f5 played, do we have a check? He gives a check, knight comes to f3, he goes back, king f6 threatening mate in one, important to come up, the only move, don't go back, no blunder, that's a huge blunder. King f7 and it's a forced mate, king f7 and it's a forced mate there. Magnus finds it threatening again a mate. The problem is now if king h6 and he resigns, oh no, he's calling the arbiter to check for the 50 move rule, and I think the arbiter says, let me go and check, because king h6 here is met with rook h3 mate. And the arbiter comes back and says, it's not 50 moves because it's only 30 moves I guess, since they exchanged the last piece. And oh, I guess Magnus is given an extra minute for the wrong claim, but it doesn't matter. Vidit resigns, it's a forced mate, unfortunate there, and what a victory here for Magnus, what a heartbreaking loss for Vidit. He played with so much of energy, so much of verve there, he wanted to beat Magnus at all costs there, but then Magnus showed his class, he kept playing on and on, did not give up, and in that end game which Magnus is so famed for, he first took with its one pawn, then the second pawn, then it was rook knight versus rook, and they kept playing on, and generally such games end in draws at top level, but Magnus really made Vidit suffer there and in the end got the win. But it's nice of Vidit to be analyzing